So I've got the section open here so that you can see that I've got a ceiling on both levels. I've got to maybe do a bit of work to modify the upper level ceiling, but the lower level ceiling you can see there is set with a height from the ground floor. So it's important that you have a look at your ceiling in section and that you know what the height is. So with mine, it's 2800 from the ground floor, and my floor is a reasonable distance above that. If you don't have a gap between your ceiling and your floor, your light's often going to get blocked by the floor above. And I'll give you an example of that in a minute. No. So if you want a light to go at the same angle as maybe a rake ceiling or something like that, you have to model the ceiling with that angle using extrusions, yeah. So you can do that. And yeah, that's one of the things with Revit that you've got to get used to. It's fussy. The developers are fussy in that way. They want things to be hosted correctly, and so the lights need to belong to the ceiling, not the roof, unfortunately. I wish they would let you do roof-hosted lights, but they just won't. So then, okay, so I know the height of my ceiling. I know I've got a ceiling because I can see it in the section. And so now I'm going to go back to the ground floor ceiling plan. That's my ground floor floor plan. So if I go to the ground floor ceiling plan, it might look basically blank, but I know that there should be a ceiling there. And maybe it's a good chance for you to experiment with the selection options and see how you can select the ceiling in plan, just so you know what you're looking at. Because the edge of the ceiling there runs along the inside of my wall, I can't really see the edge of that ceiling very clearly because the wall is covering it. But if I move my cursor onto the edge where I think the ceiling is, I can press Tab, and then again. So I've pressed it twice, and now, in the bottom left corner, hopefully you can see there that it says ceiling, compound ceiling, which is just the type of ceiling it is, plane. So if I click now, it's going to select that ceiling. And I can do that for any ceiling that should be visible in this view. So I've selected the other one there. Yeah, so you've got to press Tab. So don't move the cursor, just put it where you think the ceiling is, the edge, and then without moving the cursor at all, press Tab, and you might need to press it several times and just watch what's happening down in the bottom left corner. So the first time, yeah, so press it again, yeah, and yeah, so if you don't get the ceiling, then there's no ceiling there. Well, it could be there above, but it's not visible in this view. Right, so you need to make sure, like I said, in your section view, that you know what the height is, and that way you'll know if it's going to be visible in the ceiling plan.
Is it maybe because I've got more than one, like I've got those landings in there?
Yeah, that's right, so you're going to have things at different heights.
Okay,
So you can adjust your view range. So when you're working in a ceiling plan, it's often helpful to adjust the view range. If you go over into properties and scroll down, in your ceiling plan. Well, no, you can just do this for the whole view. So it's in properties. You need to scroll down and find view range, and then just click the edit button there. Yep. Okay, and so then a good option, just to make sure you can find everything, is to set it to unlimited. So you need to set the top and the view depth to unlimited. Yeah, and this way you'll see everything that's above. You don't have to. It's only for ceiling plans really, this is a problem. And it's only if you can't find things that you do this. So, no, you don't have to do it. If you can find your ceiling, don't do it. Yeah. Yeah, which could be helpful because if you can see that far, then there's clear space. And so here you can see, I can see the bottom of my soffit. So this is the roof that comes out above both of my levels, which is right up above the ground floor. But that's still kind of helpful. And the ceiling here is still in the way of the ceiling above. So I'm not getting confused and seeing the ceiling that's on the next level, because I've got this ceiling here that's in between. So it doesn't really hurt to set the view to unlimited if you've got enough there to see that isn't going to make it confusing. But I wouldn't just do it by default for every view. So anyhow, that's optional, entirely optional to adjust the view range, but it can help sometimes. Okay, so now if I go to the architecture tab, we've had a look at this before, I'm just going to maybe go a bit further with it. I'm going to place some lights in my ceiling, and I'll show you some other lights that you can use that don't even require a ceiling. So on the architecture tab, I'm going to go to component, and then load family. So it's just like the furniture and the other things you've been placing. If you go this time though to lighting, then architectural, internal, and you'll see a range of standard lights that you get with the program. So downlights are often good for ceilings, and they actually render probably better than most of the others. Pendant lights can be a little bit tricky, but I'll place one just so that you can see how they work. So this hemisphere or the disc, they both work reasonably well. So I'm going to double click on the pendant light disc, and now you can see it's not going to let me place it outside the building because I don't have a ceiling there, but if I bring it inside, anywhere there's a ceiling, I can place that light. So a pendant light, as you'd expect, is suspended from the ceiling, and if I look in the section view, we can see these lights coming down now. Probably not appropriate for this space, but I just wanted to show you these. So if I go back now to the perspective view, I can see those lights. Now, I want to keep this view with the setup that I've done for the sun. So I'm going to right click on this view that I've made, then duplicate view, and then duplicate again. And so I've got interior reception 1, copy 1, and I'm going to rename this and say interior reception 1 night, or night time. But probably night is enough. Okay, so then I'll turn the shadows off, I don't need those anymore. I'm just going to go to the render dialog box and change the lighting scheme to interior artificial only. I'm going to put the quality back to draft, or no, I'll just go to low, and then render, and it should render pretty quickly, using just the lights. And this is really the key to working with artificial lights. If you start trying to render with both the sun and the artificial lighting, you're asking for trouble, because it's hard to tell sometimes what the artificial light is doing when you've got all that sunlight in there. So the sun is extremely bright, far brighter than any man-made light source, really, and it's going to overpower most artificial lights. Okay, so there we are. You can see it's rendering. I can see something, but it's too dim. So what do you think I could do to... Exactly, that's right. So yeah, adjust exposure, and again, just dragging it slightly to the left, apply, and we've got light. So there we are, maybe a bit brighter again. Now it's very warm, so I can also there look at maybe adjusting the white point to make that cooler. So that it's not so orange. Okay, I've also got the light there, maybe a bit too close to that surface. So if I go back to show the model, you can actually drag objects in a perspective view, which a lot of people don't realise. Okay, so I'll just show you that again. So if you select something, you can click and drag to move it, which works pretty well in perspective. But maybe for that area, recessed lights are going to work better anyway, so I'm going to show you how to change these over. Okay, so you can see there that bright highlight on the plastic. It's reduced, but still is a bit too much. So I'm going to try a different light type there. So I can just select this, and then if I go to Edit Type, Load, go back to the lighting folder, Architectural, Internal, and I can change it over to recessed light. That's fine. And so you can see now it's actually turned into a hole in the ceiling. It's behind the other light, so I can't see it. If I go to wireframe, you can see it is there, so I'm just going to drag it back. You can see it there above my wall. But it's getting a bit difficult to tell now where that is in plan. So I'll go back to the ceiling plan. And there's a really useful option that you can use to see your floor plan. So in my ceiling plan, I can't see the things that are below my cut plane. So you get a couple of options there. You can go into that option I just showed you, your view range. So I'm going to click Edit there, and then this time look at the cut plane. So notice how here the cut plane's all the way up at 2300, and that is probably too high. Generally I have my cut planes below the door heads, so 2 metres. And that way you'll see the openings, and I've actually picked up the wall there as well because it's higher than 2 metres. So I can adjust the light position there a little bit, but it's still difficult to work out where it should go because I can't see the reception desk. So another option, again still in the ceiling plan, is to turn on the underlay. So there you'll see there's an underlay option in every view, and it's on none. So I'm going to change that to ground floor, which might seem counterintuitive because this is ground floor. But if you set the underlay to also be ground floor, then it will show things in the plan greyed out, which can make it a lot easier. So then I can adjust my downlight and have that maybe over the surface there. So I've just got the one downlight, but I'm going to show you how it renders by itself. Sorry, going to the right view. So back to here. So I can see the light there. So what should you see when you see a light in the ceiling when it's turned on? Exactly, a bright spot. And that's natural. You should usually see the light source as an illuminated, fairly bright object. And there's a well-known issue with this family. It lights up other things really well, but the light source itself looks like a bit of a dark pit of nothing. So you can see there it's got a bit of light on the edge, but then there's nothing coming out from the middle. It looks a bit strange, and it's even worse when you can see further into it. So I've made a modified version of this. It's going to select it, then go to Edit Type, and then Load. And if we go to the Revit library here on the P drive, and then go to Lighting Fixtures, and I've just called it Downlight Recessed Can Glow. So I'm just going to substitute it for that one I've made. Click OK. I will, yep. So, okay, so I'm just going to render again. Haven't changed anything else, and you'll see a big difference. Okay, so notice how now we can see the light source. Right, so then in ceiling plan view, you can copy these just like any other object using the copy button. So if you want to change the size of these lights, they're fairly large, they're the old-fashioned kind of downlight. But if you want to make it look more like a modern LED downlight, what do you think you might do to change the size? Yeah, exactly. So edit type, duplicate, and we'll say, well, what size do you think the newer type of downlights are? Yeah, that's right. They can go down to 50 mil, 80 mil. Yeah, but they are pretty small. And look, it's amazing what's happening with LED though. It's always changing. And if you've seen, and with the neon LEDs as well, which are really interesting. There's a lot of new things happening there. And the solid state LEDs, there's all sorts of things happening. So anyhow, LED downlights though have been around for ages, and they're getting smaller and smaller all the time though as well. So I'm just going to make this, I'm just going to call it 80 mil. I don't care about it being incandescent or anything like that. And then the size we've got here, recessing diameter, 80. But while I'm at it, I'll show you how to change the brightness. Usually you won't need to change this, but if you're interested, if you've been wondering how do you adjust things like your lighting intensity, you can of course adjust it down the bottom. You'll always have the properties for the light itself. So maybe you have a guess, which of these do you think is going to change the brightness? It's one of these buttons here. So you've got light loss factor, initial intensity, and initial colour. Exactly, initial intensity. So don't play with the light loss factor. Have you done any lighting theory? No, you probably haven't. Oh, good, okay. Well, that's more than most people get. They used to have, back with the old funding, we had a lighting subject. This is 10 years ago. No one's had it for a long time. So they don't have lighting, unfortunately, as a separate subject as part of design now. It is. I think it should still be a separate subject, but yeah. But the reality is, most designers don't know the technical side of it, and you get a lighting technician, exactly, yeah. And they're you know, totally, yeah. They go too far sometimes, but it's good to have people like that. So anyhow, don't play with this, but if you're interested in the physics, you can read up on that and work out what that will do. But again, the initial intensity is going to set the brightness, and all I'll say there is that you should know your units. So, do you know what any of these units are? Oh, okay, right. So, yeah, probably good. Yeah, well, see, flux is a funny one. Here, it says luminous flux, but it's actually got lumens as the units, which is good because you don't want lux. Lux is a bit harder to work with. So lumens is good. Lumens are sometimes called metric candles. So it's a single unit that you can use to adjust the brightness, and that makes things easy. Where people go wrong is trying to use things like watts, because watts are not really a lighting unit, they're a power unit, and watts only work with an efficiency. And that's why you'll see light bulbs that are 80 watts and others that are 16 watts that have the same brightness. So don't use watts, use lumens, or use candelas, which are, you know, old-fashioned candles, basically. But lumens are better. Like I said, lumens are like a metric candle. So that's it. And if we click OK, I'm going to get my nice smaller LED type lights. And oops, keep going to the wrong view. Going back here, I've got everything set up for rendering. And this is where you'll sometimes realise you've got to really play with the positioning of your lights and other objects if you want to avoid artefacts, and that's, you know, technical issues with the rendering. because I know on that reflective surface I've got right behind the reception, I'm going to get far too much reflection from these lights. Okay, so I've got these bright spots there that I don't want, and I'm going to go and just reduce that material, and we'll spend a bit of time looking at other things for materials as well. So the wall there, I showed you before, has a plastic material. So I'm going to go Edit Type, and then clicking on the Edit button, for the structure I can see there's only one material. If you've got a wall with multiple materials, you just need to make sure you're editing the one that you can see. And if I go to Browse, again I'll see the material, but it may come up with the graphics panel open. So we had a look at this earlier. This is, well, do you remember what the graphics panel controls? What sort of views does?
When it's not rendered.
That's right, rendered and realistic as well, uses rendering. So anything that isn't realistic or rendering, and rendering includes ray tracing, it'll use graphics. So in other words, I'll just click OK just to remind you of that if you haven't done it for a while. Okay, so down here we've got wireframe, hidden line, shaded, and consistent colours. All of those use the graphics panel. And then realistic and ray trace. Ray trace will take a minute. There it is. Right, they use the Appearance tab. Okay, so back to that material. Edit Type, Edit, and you're probably thinking, well, that's a long way of going into the material every time. So, if you manage things properly and give things names that are meaningful, it's usually much easier to go just straight to the Manage tab, and there's a Materials button there. So you don't have to go through the wall or the object each time. And you'll often have the same material, you know, for interior design particularly, you'll have the same material being used repeatedly. So over here, for example, I might have some other objects that also use that that yellow plastic. So I'm just going to make something else. It doesn't even need to be a wall. It could just be, well, let's just move that extrusion over so that you can see it. Okay, so remember, to assign a material to something you've modelled, you have to go to Edit in Place and then select it again, and then you'll see the material property. So remember that one, because that's where people often get into trouble. Oh, yeah, Edit Family if it's in a separate file, yep, and that'll take you to the file that it's come from. Yep. Yeah, well, you can even just, yeah, but you have to select the object to see what's assigned. So notice how here I can't see the material. So this is more for Edit in Place. If it's in a separate file, it works a little bit differently, but same basic principle, but there are some differences. That's right. Well, no, not necessarily. Not necessarily. So here, this is showing me the properties for the whole family. I want the properties for the extrusion. So I'm going to go to Edit in Place, and now I can select the extrusion that's just part of that family, and then over here I can see the material property. And I can browse now, and I'm just going to choose yellow plastic for that as well. Is this in a separate file? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so you need to select something and then look in properties. Yeah. No, just in properties first. So you need to assign something first. Manage is only after you've assigned it. Yeah, but you should see it. So I'll show it. So, yeah, and then if you scroll down, you'll see, so just like here, see how I've got material just over on the left? So there's the extrusion end, extrusion start, and then you'll have materials and finishes. Materials and finishes. Are you in properties for, you've selected your extrusion? Yeah? You haven't selected, it's not a solid then. Yeah, it's got to be an extrusion or something like that. Oh, that's a void. Yeah, no, yeah, so the void, it won't have a material. Yeah. No, you've got to select the solid part. So you might need to press tab. If you've subtracted from it, that's where you've got to watch out. So if you've done a void, you might have to press tab to... Yeah? You've got to select the original solid, not the void. Yep. Yep, yep. That's it, yep. Yeah, that's right, yeah. Yeah. No, don't add a parameter, add a material. So the button next to it is parameter, the grey button. You just need to click in the empty slot where it says none, and then, or by category, and then, yeah, that's it, yeah. So yeah, it's a bit tricky assigning materials to things like that, but once you get used to it, it works pretty well. So, okay, so I'm just going to make this view a little bit larger so that you can see I've got a couple of different objects using that material, that's all. And so going back to manage now, if I go to materials, then I can see the list of all of my materials. Yeah, so what you do is just assign something to it and make sure you know the name. So, yeah, so you can get things from the library. I'm going to show you that now. So here you've got the button up the top next to your heading that shows your library. So this button here. And then if you click on the arrow next to home, then you'll see you've got these two folders which are basically like a library. So you can just find something in there, double click on it, and that'll assign it. So I don't want to make a new material just yet though. I want to adjust the material I've already created. And it's good just to have a look at the way you work with simple materials, and then we'll look at more complex ones. So with the graphics tab, like I said, you're setting the options for shading, but then on the appearance tab you can do a lot more. So if you're just defining the most basic properties for a material, what do you think the minimum would be? What are the minimum properties you'd need to give something for it to render? Yeah, well, what makes up a material for rendering? So what do you see? When you look at a surface, what are you seeing? The colour? That's right, the colour is definitely one of the main properties. Yeah, depth, that's optional, you don't need that, you can have a flat surface. So what else though? There's really only two, exactly. The colour and the reflectance. There is another one that's sometimes considered essential, and that's the transparency. So those three basic properties are considered, I suppose, the main essential properties. Now, we're not going to look at transparent materials just yet anyway. So even without reflectivity there, if I turn that reflectivity off, I'll get the appearance of it being a little bit reflective if I use that glossiness slider. So that will make a bit of a difference, but it's mainly if you're using metallic highlights and things like that that you'll really see it. So generally you want that reflectivity option ticked, and then it will give you nice highlights and do proper reflections. So going back to colour though, clicking on the colour swatch, and I can give you my little spiel about primary colours just to make sure we're all on the same page there. Have I talked to you about primary colours before? No? So, okay, what are the primary colours? Right, no. Red, green, blue. Yeah, red, green, blue, or cyan, magenta, yellow. Now, you'll get old-fashioned people who still will tell you red, yellow, blue. Just let them believe it. It's not worth arguing, but it's wrong. They're not the primary colours. Yeah, I know. Like I said, you get people who still... Yeah, well, lights existed for, since before, humans, and light's always been the same. So...
So red, green, and
Red, green, and blue are the primaries you need to remember. Because why are primary colours primary colours? Just think about it from a very basic level. Yeah, but why are they the basics? Do you think every creature sees the same primary colours? No, of course not. The light is a spectrum that goes beyond the visible range we can see. So it's electromagnetic radiation that has different wavelengths. No, it's pretty simple once you understand it. And you need to know this to work with colour. I was taught art from a very young age, and I was taught the same as you are, that red, yellow and blue are the primaries. And then I always struggled to get nice browns that I wanted, and the art teachers would just tell me, no, you're not good enough, you're not mixing the colours in the right way, it's you, those are the primary colours, you can make anything. You can't. You cannot make all of the colours with red, yellow and blue, because they're not the true primaries. And a lot of people, even who teach colour theory, don't even understand why primary colours are primary colours. So if you're thinking about just from first principles why primary colours exist, it's because in our eyes we have receptors for those primary colours. We have receptors for red, green and blue. That's why those are the primary colours that humans see. Different animals have different receptors. So dogs, for example, they say that they see black and white. It's not true. They see two.
Yeah.
They see two colours, not three. That's the big difference. And lots of animals are like that. Other animals see... Yeah, they just don't have green. So they have red and blue. Yeah. And humans, the things we evolved from actually went down to two and then came back to three. It's one of these funny things in evolution. So it's something that lets you see, fruit and things like that a little bit more clearly is apparently the reason. Anyhow, it's good just to think about it from first principles. It makes it clearer why these things exist. And then the complementary colours, which are cyan, magenta and yellow, you create those by mixing these primaries. So here you can see red, green and blue. And it's just important to know this for design purposes because you need to know that you can make any colour using those three primaries. But this is mixing light. Okay, so light is what you see when you're looking at a TV screen or any screen or a projector is emitting light as well. And you're working with a certain colour model. You're mixing light together. And what happens when you mix all of the spectrums together? White. Exactly, you get white. Now, so when you take all of the light away, you get black. And so here, if I make these all 0, we'll get black. If I make red and green 100, and 100 in lighting is 255 usually, what do we get? Yellow. That's right. So now, if I make red 0 and blue 100, or blue 255, what do I get? Cyan. Then if we make green 0 and red 255, magenta. That's right. So those are the colours that are primaries when you're subtracting light. So in other words, when light hits a surface and is absorbed, it reflects colours, and that's what happens when you're working with pigment. So when you mix all of the paint colours together, all of the colours are going to be absorbed by the pigments, and you get black. So that's why mixing all the colours together will generally give you, a dark grey or a black colour. And so, why then does red, yellow and blue come into it? It's because until recently, I think it was in the 30s, they finally made the last true primary colour. Until then, so throughout the history of most art and painting, they couldn't make all the primary colours. Technically, it just wasn't possible. So they made approximations of those colours. They got as close as possible using the techniques that you use to make pigments, and that's where red, yellow and blue come from. Red, yellow and blue is basically an approximation of cyan, magenta and yellow. Right, so cyan is close to blue, red is kind of close to magenta, and yellow is yellow, obviously. And it gave me a lot of relief once I understood that, because I just finally realised why I couldn't make certain colours using red, yellow and blue. And when people that teach art and still work with old-fashioned paints tell you that printers are using technology tricks to give you colours with cyan, magenta and yellow, you know that it's not true, that they're actually the primaries, and red, yellow and blue is just an approximation of that, which will give you a lot of colours. I mean, all the Renaissance painting, you know, it still had amazing colours, even though they had a limited colour palette. And the other reason you need to know about this is because when you're printing, the colours you can produce using pigment are much less than what you can produce using light. It's about a tenth usually. So if you make a colour you can see on the screen, you're not always going to be able to print it out. And that's something people often will complain about and say, well, the software's wrong, I'm making this colour, and then I go to print it and I can't see it. It's not the same colour that I've got on the screen. And it's not necessarily the software or the computer, it's because it's not possible to make that colour using ink. Apple are pretty good at simulating the print colours on screen, and that's why Apple are generally considered to be good for graphic design, because they'd have colour correction or colour matching built in. But you can calibrate a PC to do the same thing. Okay, so I just want to make it clear, those are the primary colours, red, green and blue. But luckily with Revit you also have Pantone colours. If you like working with those, Pantone colours are fantastic. And you can specify any Pantone colour there in the list and it will do it perfectly. And you can print these. That's the nice thing about Pantone colours. So if I find some yellows there, and it gives you this red, green, blue value, and that's how you transfer colours. So if you want to make the same colour somewhere else, you don't need to remember what it looks like or even the name of it, you just need to jot down the RGB value and you can make it exactly the same anywhere else. So it's always RGB, yeah, or CMYK if you really want to, but RGB is usually the best. Yeah, oh definitely, yeah, I have to do CMYK for printing, yeah. Okay, so I've got my new yellow, and like I said, it's also maybe too reflective. I want to adjust that. So we can look at transparency later. And so then with reflectivity though, notice how you've got two values. You've got direct and oblique. So why do you think you might need those two different options for reflectivity? Well, just think about what happens when you see a reflection. The angle that you see something. So if you're looking in a mirror, you're going to see a full reflection no matter what. But if you're looking at, say, you might see someone's reflection in a shiny floor. But then if you walk up close to them and look down, you're not going to see that reflection. Right? So it's got these different values for when you're looking directly. Usually that's going to be lower compared to when you see the reflection at an oblique angle. So that's a really useful option. That's it. So those two main properties, and then again transparency. Those are what make up a simple material: colour, reflectivity and transparency. And this one. So now glossiness is a funny one. Glossiness basically is the blurriness of that reflection. So I should have just shown that again. So my glossiness, if it's low, is going to make it more of a matte material. If it's high, it'll be shinier. But then the interesting thing there is that as you get towards 100, that's going to give you a smoother reflection. So as you reduce that glossiness value, it's essentially blurring the reflection. So like I showed you before, as you go down from 100, it's going to make it progressively more blurry, which will actually increase the render time and also make the material look a bit speckly and not so good on lower quality. But then when you go all the way down closer to 0, it's going to take the reflections away, and again it's going to start to speed up the rendering. So it's one of those interesting things in terms of the technical side of rendering. Okay, so this is a matte plastic now. So instead of being a shiny plastic, I've made it more matte, simply by reducing the reflectivity value, but also, most importantly, by reducing the glossiness. So I'll just show you now if I render. It's going to be a big difference. Before, remember, there was a big shiny spot on the plastic that took away from the render. Okay, so no more shiny spot, but because I left the glossiness a little bit higher than 0, I've got a few dots. They're the blurred reflections. It just isn't high enough quality to see a nice blur, so I'm getting these dots instead. But again, like before, if I increase the quality up to maybe to high, then that will look much nicer. And I'll just leave it on that for now, just so it renders a bit quicker. And then have a look at materials that use a texture or an image. And so there you can see I'm just zooming in there, and it's a bit hard to see on the projector, but maybe I'll go to I'm just going to make this a bit brighter. Don't worry about what I'm doing now. I'm just making it so that you can see on the projector. There we are, a little bit more clearly. So there you can see, zooming in on the floor, I've got a timber texture. So it is wood, but it's not floorboards. So I want that to be floorboards. So I'm going to select my floor, and to get it in this view, I'll show you the trick. I'm just going right to left over the edge of the floor there, which is going to get my wall as well. So remember, just like AutoCAD, right to left does a crossing, so it selects anything you cross over. Now I can use Shift and click on the wall to deselect the wall and just leave the floor selected. So I've got my floor. Yeah, so you might need to just make a bigger, select over a bigger area. You need to still cross over the edge of your floor.
So you're doing this in your, so you're doing this in your actual views that you've created, the
Yeah.
photos that you've taken.
Yep.
So you don't do this.
You can select the floor in any view, so I could select it in the section.
Okay.
That's okay too. So here I can go to the section and click on the floor there. And that's even easier. But I'd have to go back if I want to see this in the perspective. And that's an important technique, to be able to select something in one view and then change views that leave it selected. So it's blue, I know it's selected, and I can see in properties the name of it as well. So you'll probably have this floor in your project. It's standard timber wood finish. Yep, so just looking in the list there, you should have that one loaded into your file if you've used the architecture template. So it should have towards the bottom standard timber wood finish. Yeah. You might have a couple of things. What does it say? It must say something at the top. Multiple selected, yeah. So click on the filter button. So you'll see at the top, and just clear off everything except floor. Yep. Yep, that's fine. Yep. So if you go then to edit type and click edit again for the structure to see the material, you can see this one has a few components. So if you want to adjust the thickness, you can do that there. But here I'm just going to look at the top layer, which is what we can see in the perspective view, the oak flooring. Yep. Yep. So if you click on the browse button, once you've clicked there, you can browse to adjust the material. So you've got a couple of options. You can make materials from scratch, and you can see down there I've actually got a wood flooring material that I could load in. But I want to show you instead how you can modify this one to make it your own material. So just like anything in Revit, if you right click you can rename it. So Yeah. Materials and finishes. Is this a floor? Where's it? You've got to go find the structure. So you've got to go to edit to the structure. Yeah, the materials will be greyed out. So you've got to just click on the edit button next to structure at the top. And then you should see layers. Are you seeing layers like this? Yeah, no, so in properties you've got to go to edit type. And then you'll see the edit button for structure. Yep. Yep, yep. Yep. So, yeah, so you should just be able to choose that material for the top layer. So the one in that first column, or the first row. And then browsing, you can get to the material browser. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so this is just to show you how to make materials that use a texture. You want to make it floorboards, so just change it to standard timberwood finish. Yep, so that's okay. Just change the one that you've got, so just duplicate it. So if you go to edit type and then just press duplicate and then give it a new name. Call it timber. That's fine. Yep. Yep. Okay, and so you should be able to find this oak flooring material in the list on the left there. If it's not selected already, just make sure you find that material. And then you can right click on it and rename it, just so I can show you how the management works. So once you go to rename, then you could maybe call it oak floor boards. Yep. Yep, but that's okay, we won't need the other one. Okay, so again, looking at the graphics, we've got a colour and a cut pattern. But then when you go to appearance, this is where it gets a little bit confusing. There's a name there that's different. Right, so this is just, it's a decision they made. The developers, I think, made probably the wrong decision, but that's the way it is, unfortunately. So you have what I call the Revit material. The project material is oak floorboards. But then that material uses an appearance material, or an appearance which has its own unique settings. Now, this one's okay, it's got a 0. When you see that hand and the number there, that's the number of materials using this appearance. This one isn't so bad, but I'll show you another one. Let's just find something that's using... Here we go. Okay, so here, don't worry about finding this material, but I just want to show you one. This material, notice how it's got 6 there, and that means, yeah, there are 6 other materials using this appearance. That's right. Or duplicate it if you want to change it. And that's where it can get a bit confusing until you know why, and then it's not so bad. So, where are we? Yeah, so you duplicate it on the left there? Yep, okay, so then what you need to do is right-click on Appearance, on the Appearance tab, and then either choose Duplicate or Replace. It's up to you. So this is something you just need to remember. At first, just do it without maybe thinking too much about it, but then after a while it'll become clearer why you're doing it. So one of those two options, try to do that every time you're setting up a new render material. Just the first time. You don't need to do it each time you make a change, but you have to do that. Otherwise, you're going to find things changing unexpectedly.
So she can do that now.
Yeah. So duplicate is fine. You can do that in any time, and that just copies this setting to a new name. The other option, though, is even better most of the time. Replace. And then you get the appearance library. Yeah, so that's often a better option when you're setting it up. So you've got, if you again go right click and then replace, you've got a whole appearance library which has more in it than the other library. So here, you've got appearance library, the folder, and then if you go down to, well, you've got a wood folder there with all different woods. But remember, we're doing floorboards, so if you go to flooring, there's also a wood folder there, which has all of these pre-made floorboards. And that's a great resource. Most programs don't give you this. So you get this huge rendering library built into Revit. And it's the same across all the different Autodesk programs. So if you go and use, you know, a more advanced program, it has the same materials available.
And you could spend hours. People spend
Yep.
hours and hours.
Yeah, that's right. But that's interior design. That's, yeah. Yeah. And so all you need to do, in the past you'd have to set this up from scratch, but all you have to do here is double click on the one you want, close it. Yeah, just right click on the appearance tab and then go to replace. Yeah, just double click on the one you want. So here I've got this light beechwood, but if I go and double click on a darker one, yeah, done. So that's a really good way of starting with materials that use a texture. And if you click on the image swatch there, you'll see that texture. You can adjust the size if you want to, and start to get an idea how these images, yep, give you a texture with a with the colours, and they'll also do bumps and things like that. Oh yeah, yeah. Anything that you can take a photo of, you can use as a texture. So I'll just show you very quickly. I've put a resource on the P drive for you. In the interior design folder, there's a folder called Material Images. I wouldn't recommend copying it straight away because it is, let's see, it's about 80 gig, I think. And this is about a tenth of my main resource of material images. Because I've been doing this for 20 years. I've got 5 massive hard drives per backup alone, and then I've got a big server with that much again. Yeah, so I'm up to about 14 terabytes of data that I have to back up. Yeah, yeah. So yeah. So yeah, so this alone, this is, like I said, a small portion of my textures, and it's 100 gig.
It's in that timber list, the timber flooring list. So if you go into appearance library, flooring,
Okay, so just looking through these images, you can see then the kinds of images that you can use to make your textures. So repeating textures often work really well, things like brickwork, tiles, floorboards obviously, anything that has a repeating pattern, concrete block, all those masonry units. And so you can start collecting those. These days I often will, even though I've got a huge resource of them, I'll just search for them online as I do my work as well. So you've got these subfolders as well. And you can see then even more. Okay, so if you have certain materials in mind for your designs, you can start collecting those textures over the next several weeks and look at how we can put those in. So for now though, I'm just going to click OK. OK, OK, and there we are, we've got timber floorboards. Yep. Oh look, for this, how many layers have you got? So how many layers are there, or how many rows are there in your floor? Is there just one? Yeah, so have you got in between the core boundary, is there just one? So there should be 2 core boundaries?
Oh, is it edit? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. I've got a couple of layers above wood shear structure extension.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you really only need to worry about the one on top that you're going to see for the material, and then,
One there, should I?
yeah, one above the core boundary, that's going to have your flooring. Oh, okay, I'll come and have a look at it. You might have deleted it. But anyhow, that should give you enough to be able to go on with putting some textures in. And maybe we'll look at doing materials for families and things like that afterwards. So as long as you've got some idea of those different kinds of materials. And so I'll set this to render on high quality, but otherwise that should definitely give you plenty to go on with.